Shana Hollick. I'm a librarian and board member for Creators Assemble. We here at Creators Assemble, we're a nonprofit that raises awareness about the value of comics and gaming and pop culture in education. And we provide support to educators who want to use those materials in their classrooms or other educational settings. And we also work to facilitate connections and resources to help creators find professional opportunities in this space. So I'm here with Dylan Goss, founder of Stuffed Rock Studio and writer for the webcomic Mara. So Dylan, you just tell us a little bit about yourself, what kind of work you do, what you're creating, where might people know you from, anything you want folks to know right off the bat.
Sure. Well, I am a software developer by trade. I have been a software developer for almost 20 years. So yeah, I primarily work in web development on the server backends and more recently in cryptocurrency.
Okay.
And handling that for payment processing, for instance. That's a big part of my job. And it's good, but it's not writing. And writing really is my passion. Yeah, I've been writing as long as I've been able to write, and it has been fantasy pretty much exclusively since my age was in single digits. I was writing about dragons.
Little baby Dylan writing about dragons.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
Could you share with us maybe one of your more memorable successes from that long writing career, even if it was something small or minor? Or even just talking about sort of what inspired you to get started writing in general, and then writing for comics more specifically, to use and share your voice with the wider world.
Well, for comics in particular, it took me a while to get to this point, and in retrospect, it really shouldn't have, because I've been reading comics for a very long time. My father brought home truck bed full of comics that he got from a yard sale very cheaply at $1 a box. I loved those $1 a box comics. They were great. It was mostly Spider-Man. It was almost 50% Spider-Man.
There's a lot of good Spider-Man out there, though.
There's a lot of good Spider-Man. There was Ultimate Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man. And it was mostly comics from the 70s. I also had a lot of Wonder Woman in there. Wonder Woman really was prominent in a lot of my inspiration. I didn't see a whole lot of success in writing until I was already about 30. So I was mostly writing just for myself prior to that. And around that time is when I started writing for smaller groups, and I would write short stories, and people would be really into it. And but it was a small group. I didn't think much of it. I just thought, these are my friends. Of course they're going to say this is good. That's what you do when your friends create something, right? And I also run tabletop RPG games a lot as the game master. Of course, your Dungeons and Dragons, everybody knows that. I try to introduce groups to games that they might not have played before, like Shadowrun and Exalted. And there are a lot of good games out there. More than I have time to learn, of course. But I realized that doing this, I really like introducing people to new things, to new lore, and to new experiences. And Mara is actually based in part on a past campaign. Of course, it had to take liberties in order to become a work of fiction. And one of the more memorable successes was actually with Mara. Very recently, one of the pages was nominated for Helly's Best Digital Art of 2021.
Very cool.
Yeah. The fans named that page. I haven't been naming each individual page, but they named that one "A Warrior Is Born." So that was nice. It received a lot of positive, a lot of positive comments, a lot of great feedback, and of course that's in no small part to the illustrator. Rosie Wu is a genius.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Rosie, and we'll talk some more about Mara, but while we're here,
Of
the
course.
art in Mara is gorgeous. And if anyone wants to check it out, I mean, at the end, we'll talk about where people can find you online and on socials, but Mara, it's at mara-comic.com, so mara-comic.com. And it's very easy, if you haven't started yet, I was able to get through the archives last night. The story is kind of just getting started in chapter 1. So it's really easy to get caught up, and the art is beautiful. So could you talk a little bit more about Rosie, about how the two of you met and started this collaboration?
Sure. So we started doing this during the coronavirus. I have not met Rosie Wu in person.
Yep.
So what happened was I contacted a friend of mine who I've done a lot of contracts with for software development. She's a designer, and she has done some comics in the past. It's not her major thing. She's not majorly an illustrator, but this is someone I've worked with before. So of course I offered her this job first, and she looked at the script for chapter 1, and she said, "Well, I like this, but I don't do fantasy. I do sci-fi." And I didn't really know that about artists, but what I learned later is that artists will have a lot of different styles that they can do, but they will only be comfortable in certain genres. You will be hard pressed to find an artist who can do everything. And now that I know more about art, I know that it's unreasonable to expect that. But I think the average person doesn't realize that, as I certainly didn't going in. So being in that industry, she of course had a lot of contacts. She went to art school, right? So she put out the job ad for me, and I had over a dozen applications in the first day. And none of them were bad. Not a single artist was bad. Obviously, some people are going to be better than others. If not at art itself, then at applying for a job. A couple of them had no portfolio at all. And at that point, I just say, "Well, I'm sorry, but I have no way of evaluating how good you are."
Yeah.
Eventually, I shortlisted 3 people, and I gave each of them the same paid commission. Paid because I've done freelancing before, and I've had people ask me for free work. Don't do free work. Don't do free work.
That's good advice. Yeah.
And don't ask people to do free work.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave them each the same commission. Give me a concept art of Mara, and I didn't say exactly how she should look. I gave them the script, and of course, if they had any questions, I would answer them. And we talked about the world that Mara is in at great length, but at no point did I say her hair is this long,
right,
and she has this skin tone. I didn't say anything like that, and I got 3 very different results, and none of them were bad. They were all very good, but I found myself really looking forward to what Rosie was doing more than any of the other artists. And eventually I came to realize that was a pretty good sign that this is the person I want to work with.
Right. That just seemed like a good fit for this particular story that you wanted to tell. And I think that's important. Like, as you were talking about, none of them are bad artists. A lot of it is just finding the right sort of tone for a specific project and for the specific world that you guys are trying to build here. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about sort of give us, for people who haven't read Mara before, haven't heard of it, kind of what it is in a nutshell. What is this world that Mara lives in? Who is she? And also, if you could talk a little bit about, the story seems very rooted in mythology. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the inspiration there, if this is coming from real world mythology, if you're kind of making it up as you go.
Oh, absolutely. So I have taken some inspiration from the real world here. Mara's tribe is based partly on Vikings and partly on the Inuit. And these probably seem like odd choices if you're just coming in, because this is a desert world almost. Like, they have a river, but everything around them isn't lush or icy like you might expect.
Yeah, their landscape is not as forgiving as you might think. Right?
They have probably the only river for quite a ways, and that's a very precious resource. Water is a very precious resource in this world, and the reason things are like this is that before this story begins, there was a war between the gods that set the sky on fire and destroyed the day-night cycle. There is no day-night cycle in this world. It is always red sky at all times. And they used to be an Arctic tribe. There's no Arctic anything anywhere anymore.
Oh, okay.
So they had to adapt very quickly, and they lost a lot of their traditions, as they would have to in order to adapt, right? You can't cling to traditions that tell you to wear furs when you're in that kind of weather, for instance. And they found that they had to trade when they were previously a pretty self-sufficient tribe. So in order to trade, they began to more and more use the common language of the area and lost their own language in the process. So that's why the wolf spirit, is called Amaro, because they don't realize that word just means wolf anymore. Nobody knows the language anymore. They assumed that from their writings that survived, this was the spirit's proper name.
Okay. Yeah, there seems like there's a lot that's going to be coming and already about sort of identity and this, Mara's going to clearly getting geared up for some sort of epic adventure or journey. Right. And I'm really excited to see where it's going. I also wanted to ask you, on the about page for the comic, you list several translators. So is there a plan to have the comic available in multiple languages?
The comic actually is available in multiple languages right now. Cool. At the very top of the page, and I should probably make this more prominent, but at the very top of the page, you can switch languages.
Oh yeah, I see it's available in Spanish, in Portuguese, and in Chinese as well, in addition to English.
That is correct.
So that's really great. Is that, clearly you just wanted to, bring this story to a larger audience? Was there other motivation there?
Bringing the story to a larger audience was the major motivation there. I don't really have a good marketing plan for languages I do not speak, but I'm figuring it out as I go along.
No, it's really great though. I don't think a lot of people, I work with a lot of international folks. I'm based here in the US, but I don't think a lot of people realize that, even something, a simple translation into Spanish, for example, can really just open up a whole new world of readership, of fandom, and just really make things more accessible for folks. Folks who don't speak English, or folks who speak English as a second language, or folks who are just interested in learning new languages. You can read them side by side. There's a lot of cool things you can do with comics that way. So I really, really appreciated that you had that in mind.
Absolutely. What I didn't anticipate when we brought on the Portuguese translator, we also brought on a lot of Brazilian fans pretty much immediately. More than half of the people who like Stuffed Rock on Facebook are in Brazil. I was not expecting that at all.
So cool though. You get to make this whole world of connections. And yeah, that's great.
Brazilian
Mara
comic
can become
fans they
yeah.
have such positive energy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. We talked a little bit about, when you were younger, getting those giant boxes from the yard sales and the garage sales of Spider-Man and Wonder Woman. Is there a mainstream comics, or you also said you're into TTRPGs, so maybe something in that world, a mainstream project that you would love to be involved in? And if you could, maybe, if there's some changes you'd make to it or why you'd want to be involved.
Well, there are a couple that I would really like to be involved in. As far as TTRPGs go, I would really love to do an Exalted story, because Exalted really leads itself to epic adventures, and that is really my jam. I love epic adventures. And everything about Exalted is epic. Your default character, what they recommend new players to play, is actually granted a small power of the sun god. And that is more than enough to just be the most amazing thing anybody has ever seen. Right off the bat.
Gods and heroes, pretty epic.
Yeah. If that's how you start, well, imagine what kind of adventure you're going on. Right. Now, for comics, I would really like to do a Dula Dent anthology. Focus on her, because I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential there, and they didn't really have a solid direction with her. Different writers did different things, and it wasn't really cohesive. And I mean, that's the nature of a universe tied together like DC or with Marvel, But I feel like there's a lot of potential there that they just didn't explore, and I would really love to be the guy to do that.
Yeah, very cool. What advice would you have for new and aspiring creators who are trying to break into the webcomic space or to otherwise get noticed? Earlier, we talked about, try not to give away your work for free. Your work has value. If there's anything else you wanted to tell our up and coming folks.
I say that, but I do put the comic online for free, and
it's true.
Yeah. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize going in, and I definitely didn't realize going in, is how much work it would be to get yourself out there. Like, people always say, "Oh, it's really easy for Marvel because everybody picks up the lists, the release lists," and they don't realize that Marvel spent decades building these connections. It wasn't given for free. It was started by a guy with a pencil and a table, and a lot of work went into building the empire they have now. And the same thing goes for DC and Image and Dark Horse and every other big or even medium creator you can name. So if you're just starting out, you probably don't have a marketing guy, which means you are the marketing guy.
Yep.
And I'm also the social media manager, and I'm also the webmaster, and all of the.
You're the accountant. You're the janitor.
Yeah, all the staff roles that I haven't filled, I'm doing.
Yeah, so much of life in general, right? But I think so much of, this comic space and just trying to get started in a business like this is building relationships, is making those connections. It's, Creators Assemble is a pretty new nonprofit, but it's one of the things that we were really passionate about trying to start is how can we use the connections we already have to help new creators kind of break in? You can have the best webcomic on the planet. You can have the most amazing art, the most compelling story. You can buy a Squarespace site and put it up online. But if nobody can find it, if nobody knows it's there, then it's not going to go anywhere. It's all about trying to figure out, how can I make connections to get my work in front of people who will actually care about it?
Absolutely. And it is constant. You have to be always on. You have to be coffee, always on. It's maybe a little bit cliched to reference Kevin Hart at this point, but you need to be more like Kevin Hart. He's a really hardworking guy, and you need to do the same thing. You need to just be constantly getting out there. And one thing he likes to say that I think is relevant is everyone wants to be famous. No one wants to put in the work.
Yeah, it is hard work. I think a lot of people, and a lot of times that gets obscured, right?
Right.
People think that fame just sort of comes out of nowhere, or that notoriety just happens. But there's definitely a lot of work behind the scenes. To that end, is there something that you wish fans knew about comics or about supporting creators in this space? Somebody stumbles upon Mara comic online and they're like, hey, I love it. Now what? How can I make it better for Dylan to go out and keep writing cool things?
Well, one thing is that whatever comic you're following, it not necessarily mine, but it definitely applies to mine as well. I think it applies to most webcomics out there. They're probably producing as fast as they can. Mm-hmm. Nobody's holding back comics to say, well, if I get this number of patrons, I'll put out more. We're putting out as many as we can. And it is true that if we do get more patrons, we'll be able to afford to put out more. Mm-hmm. But we're not holding back out of some greed. That's definitely not the issue. We're making this comic because we care about making this comic. This was never a money venture, but money does make the world go round.
Well, and as you mentioned right at the beginning of your intro, you have a day job. You're a software developer, and a lot of even very successful and somewhat famous artists and writers still have day jobs.
Absolutely.
So, as much as we'd love to spend 24/7 creating comics, no one can do that. Even aside from your day job, you still need to sleep and eat and occasionally just hang out on your couch and turn your brain off for a few hours.
Absolutely.
So yeah, being mindful of our limits, right?
And my daughter's going to be 2. I definitely need to spend more time with her. I can't be just writing all the time.
If only there were, 20 more hours in a day, right? But yeah, so is there anything, I want to give you a chance to let people know where to find you, but before we do that, as we start to wrap up, is there anything else that you want to say that we haven't talked about yet about your work or about this comic space?
Yeah, the comic space in general, I would really like to see more creators come together. I mentioned that I'm also into tabletop gaming. The tabletop gaming community really comes together. The comics gaming community doesn't come together as much. And I think that's a shame. We should. If we want to call ourselves a community, we really should come together because that's what communities do.
Yeah, there's pockets here and there, but yeah, I think you're right. I'm new to the TTRPG community, but I've seen right away, how sort of expansive that community is and how welcoming large parts of that community really are. And I'm hoping to see more and more of that in comics as we keep going. So yeah, are there any projects you have coming up, or if you can maybe tease a little bit what's next for Mara? What can we look forward to in the next few weeks and months?
Well, let's just say Mara isn't going to be by herself forever.
Okay. Yeah. Is Mara maybe about to meet an adventuring party, perhaps?
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
Exciting. All right, so where can people find you on the web, on socials? I know the comic, it's at mara-comic.com. Where else can people find you and your work?
I'm also on Facebook at Stuffed Rock Studio. I'm also on Twitter at Stuffed Rock. Those are my major web presences.
Okay, and I definitely Yeah, definitely encourage folks. That's what I was just going to say. Stuffrock.com, but also mara-comic.com. There's links to a store there where you can get some really nice looking Mara merchandise. So that beautiful art, you can own it for yourself on like a postcard or a t-shirt. And I'm thinking about buying some stuff. It's beautiful. And there's also a link to your Patreon on there if folks really want to support this endeavor and get to be able to support you doing more of this work. Patreon's a really great way to do that. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, Dylan. Everyone who's watching, please head to creatorsassemble.org to visit our galleries, discover creators like Dylan, or let us know, how we can help facilitate making some connections, with comics, with writers, with artists in the industry. You can also find links to our social media there on creatorsassemble.org and see links to our upcoming events. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.